Hey folks, happy Friday and welcome to another episode of Plan A Conversation. So listen, my DMs and my emails have been blowing up from last week's conversation with Quentin Vinny. Again, if you have not had a chance to listen to this incredible wellness expert and the greenhouse tea company that he has just started and all the great initiatives that he is doing, please check that out wherever you listen to your podcast. And also a special shout out and thank you to your feedback on the new 365 Plan A Nightly Meditations from my second book. You can now, instead of just listening to me speak with my IG Lives on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, you actually can listen to a guided meditation from my second book. Again, 365 Plan A Nightly Meditations, and they are really great, I have to say. So listen, in today's conversation, I'm so excited to connect with the lovely lady you are seeing on the screen. And just as a setup to all this, I absolutely love the gift of being connected to wonderful people. And people ask me all the time, how's it that you find podcast guests? And I just say, literally, I think it's one of the universe's gifts that I've been blessed to just meet new and interesting people from all walks of life. My good buddy and friend, and I say brother from another mother, Mike Simone introduced me to Christina Mace-Turner. She's the founder of Mab Stoke, and we're going to get into her story as to how that company came about. But without further ado, Christina, welcome to our conversation.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you, Christina. And first thing I would like to just discuss right out the gate, so many people in this time and space. I was just listening to another podcast and looking on all the interesting business startup editorials. It is now the time people are diving deep and they're creating things that they've always wanted to do, with their lives. And
Mm.
I'm curious to know with Mab and Stoke, was that something that you always wanted to do? And what is that
Well,
company?
that's a big question. I,
Yeah.
I mean, so first of all, I'll say over the last year, I've had, for such an incredibly difficult year, one of the most creative years of my life. So without question, something about being forced to stay still and in one place is normally I'm like flying all over the place. I'm just rolling one meeting after another and but something about being in the same physical space, I just started. I mean, it was sort of terrible for my family because I took over every inch of our house. But but I just really started, incrementally improving and working on the projects that I've been doing. And like a whole new set of things came about because of that. But to get back to the first part of your question, yeah, with Mab and Stoke, I was not looking to start a company. I had just left my previous startup that I co-founded called True Botanicals, is a
Mm,
like a non-toxic skincare company. And before that, I was in the tech industry, and I love tech and I love plants. Those are my two
mm,
passions.
mm.
And so plant innovation is really interesting to me. But when I left True Botanicals, I was so burnt out. I was just,
Yeah.
and people talk about burnout, but I mean, I really was like, my hair was falling out. I mean, I have very short hair, but still it was falling out.
Yeah.
and, uh, and I had this crazy autoimmune thing where I would touch stuff and even with the littlest bit of pressure, I'd get these big welts,
Hmm.
on my hands and stuff. And it was all from stress and not caring for myself. So I'd spent a lot of
Mm.
time building a company to care for other people, done very little to care for myself, which is kind of typical of me sometimes. I have to really focus to be
Yeah.
good to myself
Mhm.
because there's so much I want to do. I'm like one
Right.
of those people who gets really into things. And so anyway, so I started taking a lot of different plant medicine to help myself get back to feeling good because I noticed, my bedside table was sort of covered in things to help me sleep, things to help with my migraines, the pain, the this, and I was like, wow,
Mm.
this is not for me, and I grew up, my mother made tinctures when I was a kid and stuff. So I was
Mm.
always open to plant remedies in addition to allopathic medicine.
Mhm.
And so anyway, so I had this great success when I started using plant medicine and feeling better. And within 4 weeks, I felt incredible. I mean, I had access to incredible, phytochemists and herbalists who've been doing this for many, many years. who helped me come up with a regimen. But after that experience, it was so real and profound for me in terms of a
Mm.
shift of how I felt overall. It was like somebody took the blanket off over my head or something. I can't explain it, but I was like, wow, I really want to help other people this way because I want to empower people to care for themselves. Like power is important to me in terms of how it's distributed. I think about it a lot, and I thought this is a way that I could actually, in some small way, make a contribution and help other people be well and care for themselves.
I love that, Christina, and it's so interesting. The last week's guest, the exact same thing that I'm hearing over and over again. People are trying to figure out what are things that are causing them dis-ease within themselves. They get a remedy, they get an answer, and I'm like, wait a minute. If I'm experiencing this, other people may be experiencing this as well, and potentially maybe I can create a mark and or a company utilizing that, philosophy as well. One thing I'm really
Yeah.
curious to know from you and your perspective, how is it that people can think about creating company, like you're saying, when they're so busy? We are moms, we're dads, we're taking care of so much responsibility, we're caregivers to parents. Like how does
Yeah.
one begin to even think about wanting to create something?
I mean, it's funny because the periods in my life where I've been most creative and come about, like, like with this company, Mab and Stoke, have been when I wasn't looking for it. It's that I forget who the French
Mm.
philosopher was who I'm gonna mess it up, so I won't even try and do it. But the idea being that, it's when you're doing nothing that you actually have the ability to be creative and think of the thing that really matters to you. For one thing for me personally is just that I can't even think of a time in my life where for any period of time I worked on something I wasn't really into, like really excited about. And historically I think I've gotten advice from people that that isn't always the right path, that there's a way things are supposed to happen and you should do that, but I don't agree with them. And so the big creative stuff, I mean, the way you do it, it like comes from love and like passion in yourself and love for other people, because it's what just to sort of put a finger on it, like what you were saying is, I realize people realize that they could do this thing for themselves and then they could do it for other people. So if you care about other people and you find things that drastically improve your life, improve the planet, solve big problems or even little problems, that is like, to me, that is the most gratifying thing in the world. I mean, I have been working, for example, on this one product for over 2 years, which we're finally going to have this fall. And I started by making this product. It's a product for actually people's physical discomfort, right? It like for pain or tight muscles or tension or whatever. But I started making it for my mother. You talk about caring for your parents, right? My mother had a lot of back pain and she's elderly. And so, like 100 iterations ago, I started making this product and now it's coming out. And I have all these beta testers and they literally can't live without it. So I don't have enough of it. So I've been making like a kind of proxy product that's almost as good as it that I can make at home. But that is, I can't tell you how great that makes me feel that I could actually help another person like not be in pain or unlock them so they can go do the things they want to do with their lives. That's kind of
Yeah.
how I think about it.
Yeah, I love that. And my mind is drawn back to what you were saying because I actually agree with you. What you love and what you enjoy lends itself to, creating, these very interesting things. I can think of a young lady who just made, I think, in a 200-meter, she's qualified for the Olympics, and they were
Wow.
interviewing her. I can't think of her name, so I apologize in advance to our listeners and also our visual component audience. And she said, they were asking her, how is it that you are a track star, you're graduating from Harvard and get you getting a master's in epidemiology? And she goes, I'm doing every single solitary thing I love. I love epidemiology. I love track and field. And she mentioned something else that she was working on. She
Right.
goes, and that's why I bring my passion. I'm so good at these things.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that is the other piece. It's like, okay, there's so many hours in the day. And if I really looked at it, I probably work like 15 hours a day, but I don't do 15 hours a day as something I don't love. it's something that I'm like drawn to do, that I can't wait to do. I wake up, probably 3 hours before anybody else in my house. And, and I'm very productive in the morning. I find my brain is really refreshed. Actually, I can't wait to listen to your meditations, because I meditate at night every night. And I find that is just, oh
Okay.
my gosh, so helpful. Makes such a big difference in my life. And but yeah, if you're really into it, like if you really love it, it's not work. What's horrible is when and honestly, maybe, the flip side is people burn out and you just overdo it and you have to constantly try and modulate yourself back. But I can't really relate, like, to people who feel satisfied. I mean, sometimes we're all just forced to work on things that we don't want to do. It's a privilege to
Mhm.
be able to do the things you care about. But
Mhm.
when you have a choice, you know, the people who I just don't understand it. Like, I want another 100 years of my life. Like, I have so many things I want to do. So,
Christina, you are my people. I literally have just was saying this to my partner, like, wait a minute, how do I have this amount of years I'm thinking left in this life? There's so much I want to do.
I
And
know.
I want to get back to the conversation of balance and wellness, but in a little bit. But let's really define for our audience what Map and Stoke is all about and the products that you sell.
Sure, sure. So, I mean, it's funny because we're in a little bit of a transition, because we're coming out with a huge new slate of products. It's sort of like our 2.0. Mab and Stoke is launching this
Cool.
fall. But Mab and Stoke is a plant innovation company, and we make full spectrum plant remedies. It's kind of that simple. But what's different is that we are product people, and I'm thinking about modernizing herbalism. So taking the plants that have worked for thousands of years and people use around the world. I mean, 80% of the world uses herbal medicine as their primary healthcare. And in this country, a lot of people don't realize that, because it's been legislated out of existence. But that's very disempowering to people. So it's all about putting plants in the products and experiences that people love, so they'll take it every day, so they don't have to think about it. So, like, we do a partnership with Butcher's Daughter, for example, and they make chill brownies, which are like stress relieving brownies. And believe it or not, what's in those brownies is like a full day's worth of adaptogenic herbs. It's not like some little sprinkling, right? It's
Wow. Yeah.
very, yeah, it's very precise. And we have some other products coming out with them. We do a botanical cider with Wolfer Vineyards, which is cool because it has all these digestive herbs in it. And it's delicious and wonderful. So people are going to take it every day. So, because herbs work, it doesn't matter what you take them in. What matters is that you take them daily. So the more consistent you are in their use, because it's so subtle, what it's doing is basically offering, like, your body's various systems, like, very specific nutrition. So, like, milk thistle, for example, is incredible to support your liver and will help you metabolize alcohol if you drink, or all the other
Hmm.
things you use your liver for. It's not doing something to your liver. But the compounds that are in milk thistle support that system, so it's optimizing your system. So
Hmm.
herbal medicine is really just about turning the volume back up on your body's own natural abilities.
Hmm.
It's pretty cool, and, like, it definitely really really good for modulating stress responses. So that's what Mab and Stoke is about. So we do all kinds of products. Right now we make Mab tabs, and we have products that come from the outside in, right? Like, that protect your skin barrier, from pollution and that kind of thing. And obviously, I know how to make those products because I made them in my last company. But the idea is really just about using plants to really enhance people's wellness, their performance, and how they're feeling.
I love that, Christina. And so many people that I know think that herbs and plant-based medicines or plant-based care, it's woo-woo. It's all
Yeah.
these things that,
Yeah.
it's not going to work. Pass me my Excedrin, pass me my
Yes.
Advil. What do you say to people who are maybe in between trying to figure out where they stand?
Well, I mean, it's so true what you just said. I mean, and I think that that is a far majority of people think that. it's not rational. It's actually hardwired into us or
Mm.
taught to us over time, right? And in other cultures, this isn't an issue. Like in Asia, people are very accustomed to using herbal medicine, right?
Mhm.
Traditional Chinese medicine is incredibly successful in helping people. The way I think about it, and I try to explain it to people, it's like Hippocrates said, first the word, then the plant, then the knife. And it's like a progression, right? So the idea is we're each of us is an individual with unique needs. And sometimes, you can kind of figure out your way without doing any kind of intervention. Other times you're going to look to plants, right, to help enhance your body's system. So your body is so incredible. I mean, if you think about it, like the way our bodies are able to heal themselves, it's unbelievable. It's like a miracle,
Truly,
you know. So
truly.
and nature is incredibly powerful. Look at what's going on with climate change. Like look at what happens just when it rains. We take it for granted, but try and make a leaf. It's not easy to make a leaf. Like ginger, which we all put in all of our food, it has over 700 different compounds. Those compounds are pain relieving, they're antispasmodic, like so your muscles aren't spasming, they're
Mhm.
anti-inflammatory, they support your immune system. I mean, this is like all amazing and there for us and accessible, but because it can't be monetized in the same way as the pharmaceutical
Mm.
industry, we have been trained that it's not valuable. But the
Right.
reality is that so I focus very much on making products that work, that are perceivable impact within like 20 to 40 minutes depending on how quickly you metabolize things,
Mhm.
because I think your point is absolutely right. People need to experience something to believe it in this
Mhm.
category, because one, a lot of products out there are like a little scoop of this, a little scoop of what the heck is that? It's
Right.
like having a salad. You're not going to feel that much better. I mean, use a nice salad, but it's not necessarily going to make a profound difference in your wellness. However, if you had a precisely, dosed, amount of something on a daily basis that was
Mhm.
really appropriate for your body, you would feel a difference. So we focus on effectiveness and also ingredients that are sustainably sourced, sustainably cultivated is really important. So I'm a very no pesticides person, to the
Yeah.
degree that I can avoid them. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And for people who are just starting out in their herb journey and plant, based wellness initiatives, where should one start with Mab and Stoke? Like, what is a good onboarding or experience?
Yeah, I think, today I would say focus Mab tabs or calm Mab tabs.
Mm.
We have new versions of those products that are coming out that are more grab and go,
Mm.
and I think taste even better. So I'm excited for people to try the new products. But definitely our most popular products are calm, because people are very stressed out, but also
Mm.
the ingredients in that product, ashwagandha, hops, magnolia, they all help to modulate your body's stress response and specifically sleep. So,
Mm.
interestingly, they won't make you tired, but as you take them consistently, people who wake up during the night or have a difficulty like with ruminating and stuff, they sleep really deeply and they can't live without it. So,
Mhm.
I'm excited because the new version of Calm actually has some additional ingredients that I've been working on that I found that I think it's even better. But that's where I would start.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about a spectrum of wellness things, especially plant based initiatives to get people really jump started and into this journey. I'm curious to know, what are some of your spiritual practices that you use alongside like the different tabs and things like that of your company?
Yeah, yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think of meditation honestly as a spiritual practice because it's when I'm really sitting there being my most authentic self, most sort of focused and quiet self and contemplative, but
Mm.
also clearing my mind, that act of, noting and sort of putting so I mean, I was raised Greek Orthodox, but I wasn't really raised in a religious household.
Hmm.
I was baptized and stuff like that. If I were gonna drop back onto earth and find some spiritual practice for myself, I'd probably be closer to like a Buddhist or somebody who like that. I'm a little, I'm a little skeptical. Not skeptical, that's not the right word. I'm not a good follower. So I find it
Mm.
personally like difficult for me to, I'm always questioning. I'm like, but what about, and that is, I need to get better, I think, in making leaps of faith with other people. I think if I'm really honest, like I feel like I was raised in a way where I didn't have like the type of trust that a lot of people have. Like I grew up in a kind of difficult family. And so as a result, I became much more self-reliant and less reliant on like the communities of people that other people I see, like my friends, really draw tremendous strength from, right? They are, and so I admire that, and yet I haven't ever really plugged into it. I guess that's the best answer if I really think about it.
No, I relate to that very strongly. My background is a Princeton seminarian. I graduated from
Oh,
Princeton
that's
with
right. I read that about you. Yeah.
yeah, and these are the kind of conversations that I think people, especially I hear on the other side of the church, are so afraid to have because they think they're going to be ostracized, and they're very real and they're very valid. And I think
Yeah.
if we continue to open up spaces like this podcast and other things that friends are doing to be able to have some of these kind of conversations, it can, support us in what we believe and just allow
I
us to
love
grow.
Yeah, I love that you asked the question. No one's ever asked me that question in my entire life, so that's a very interesting question. But I also, in that vein, I think about the things that have really influenced me and how I identify who I am and what I want out of my life and stuff, and the things that I think often, religion plays a very significant role in people's lives relative to their values. I'm sure you've read this or heard it, but like Plato's allegory of the cave. I don't know if people listening are familiar with it, but so I'll just give a quick little recap. But the idea is all these people are trapped down in a cave and they're chained together, and all they can see with the fire and brimstone down there is like the shadows on the wall. And then you somehow, like by some miracle, you break free of the chains and you get up to the top of the cave and you look out, and it is like this incredible, beautiful, verdant, pastoral setting. What do? You've been chained in the cave. And there was a period in my life where my first response to that, the first time I read this allegory, was you run like crazy, as far and as fast as you can. And then, I mean, it's a terrible thing to admit about yourself. And I think about that, like that's sort of when I was leaving Apple and I had been living this very difficult period in my life. But of course, that's not at all like the person I would want to be, right? You go back down in the cave and you help bring everybody else up. That is the person that I would like to spend my time being. And so, while I don't have an affiliated spiritual practice, I have values that I hold very dear and I try and dedicate my life to them.
And in my book, that is a spiritual practice. I believe that wholeheartedly because so many people think, especially listeners of this podcast, if it's not dedicated and it's not following this, it's not a part of, this spiritual practice. But those
Yeah.
values and those moments of learned lessons to me is the cornerstone and the center foundation for how we move and be in the world. And I love that, Christina. I love
Yeah.
that.
That's
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, I agree. Thanks.
Absolutely. So, sort of segueing between your many lives, you just mentioned you were at Apple for some period in time. A lot of people of this podcast email and they say, Clay, I have had this career in investment banking. I've had this career in a VC, managing director. And now I want to become a Pilates instructor. I want to
I have
open up,
friends who have done that. Yeah.
right? So many people feel like all of their previous careers and lives are wasted because
Oh,
now they want to transition to something more meaningful. I
mm,
disagree with that
I'm
wholeheartedly.
with you. Yeah.
Okay. break that down for us. How
Okay,
has
no,
okay.
no, no. It is the opposite. This is like the richness of life. I mean, when I think about the people I want to work with or that I want to, surround myself with, they're the people who did all those things that interested them and were brave enough to kind of like keep pushing the envelope, like keep going to the edges and finding those experiences and those communities and those people to embrace and jump in with. And my friend Alan, when I was leaving one job and I was like not sure what I was going to do, he always gives me this really good advice. And so Alan said to me, he's like, whatever you do, just recognize it's not what you're going to do for the rest of your life. It doesn't have to be forever. It's just, so just go do it. You have nothing to lose. Don't torture yourself over it. Sometimes just be intuitive. Because as much as you try and plan everything out, especially in your career, it's just not going to work out that way. Like it's just not how life happens. And so I think, I mean, I personally feel, I don't know how to say this because I don't like to say there is even a right way to do it, but
Mm,
my way and the way that I have found most fulfilling, despite the fact that other people, as I think I alluded to before, have said to me, from the time I was in college, I was a visual arts and semiotics major. That upset my parents a lot. That was like, oh, great. Now you're never going to make any money. No
what
one
are you
will
gonna do
ever
with
hire
this?
you. Yeah. And
Yeah.
then, so of course, at some point they were right. And so I made myself go to law school. And then I did that for a soul crushing year of my life. But I took a lot of skills from both of those things that in every job I've had, I've taken skills and experiences that I have brought forward, even though they're totally unrelated fields many times, these leaps. And I mean, I use that semiotics degree every day. That's how I think. That's how I create things. I mean, it's like who would have thought? And so I feel like people are somehow comforted by the thought that there is a path to something. You know what I mean? Like there is a like if you do this, you've got it in the bag. And as I've gotten older, I've found that I feel totally free to know that there is no path and there's not that much control. I can't always control the outcome, but what I can control is what I'm doing in the moment, how I'm being to myself, like how I'm being to the people around me, who I surround myself with. Like those are the things that I try and focus on now. And I aim as best I can to make an impact into the future.
Yeah, I aim as best as I can to make an impact into the future. Powerful, powerful piece. One word that came to mind from your last sequence of your story was intuitive. A lot of people ask the question of how do I know that intuitive voice inside of myself is saying this is the time to embark
Mhm.
upon this new venture. When did you feel that, and how did you make that decision to become a founder?
Sometimes, Clay, I look back on that as like a moment of madness. Having a startup is so horrible a lot of the time. Like anyone, and you're an entrepreneur, like, it's just very, it comes from this little seed, this little creative seed of love and passion for something, and you do it, or you have this great idea, and then there are times where there's profound regret. Like, isn't there an easier way to do things? Like, why did I make it so hard on myself? We launched Mab and Stoke into a pandemic. Um, and I'll give you like a real example because sometimes it's kind of helpful. But like, we launched into this pandemic with an innovation product, right? I was innovating on herbs and I'm thinking, great, I've totally productized this thing to make it really cool for people. We have a map tab. Well, what happens? There's a pandemic. Okay, didn't see that coming. I can't really take credit for that one, but people went from embracing innovation to needing to feel grounded and safe and have relatable experiences. Uh, Understandably so, me too. And so, we struggled for like a year to figure out the balance. And now I'm like, oh, I was just about, honestly, if I think about it, in December, I was like, if I cannot figure this out in the next month, I'm giving up. Like, I'm going to move on to my next project. I'm just not going to, like, I'm not going to punish myself over it, but I've got to figure it out. and I have to believe again, because I started to feel like a little like I wasn't believing. And then that was it. It was like within a week, I totally figured it out. And I had this crazy creative burst. And then I was suddenly, and it all made sense to me. And then I was able, of course, once you believe it and you understand why you're doing it and how it's going to work, then I was able to easily like raise another round of money, you know? But like I didn't want to go and raise any more capital without being certain that I knew where we were headed. Um, because I don't want to take other people's money unless I was sure I was going to do something good with it. So, but then I felt clear, and I've felt clear ever since, and energized by that.
I love that, Christina. And you just explained something differently than what I've ever heard it before. It sounded like the belief was the impetus for firing up that intuition. And a lot of people think of it the other way around. Like intuition will then come and the belief will then follow afterwards. But it
Oh
sounds
yeah,
like, yeah.
not for me.
Uh-huh.
I, it's like I have to really believe, because it gets back to what we were talking about. How many hours do you have in your life? Do you really want to spend them on something you don't believe in? I mean,
Yeah.
if you have a choice, you don't always have a choice, but when you have the luxury of a choice, wow. Like, I mean, and then you take out time for sleeping. Woo, that's like a whole lot of time. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
I really value those hours. And also because I also get so absorbed in my work, and I can't really do it in a halfway. I've tried to, tinker. I'm not really a tinkerer. Um, but that it means that the people around me, like my family, I don't spend as much time with them, or even if I'm in the room, my brain is somewhere else. And so if I'm going to be separate from them and like not be present for them, it has to be worth it. I felt that way when my kids were really little. I feel that way, they're teenagers now, but I feel that way with my husband, my friends. Like it just I have to believe, and then
Yeah.
I'm like all in.
I love that. Have to believe, and then I'm all in. Speaking of just community, how has your community supported you in your endeavors? I tell people all the time, look and see who your community is before you start off on this endeavor, and find some trusted friends and trusted
Yes.
confidants to support you. But tell me about
Oh,
your experience.
yeah, that's so true. Well, it's funny. Because as you get older, you make more friends, all over the place. For the last, I don't know, I've been back on the East Coast for 2 years, but before that, I was in the West Coast in Northern California and in LA for a little while, but mostly in the Bay Area. And I worked so much while I was there. I mean, I was just always doing this, that I didn't actually develop a really, really strong personal community right where I lived. But instead, when I was traveling for work, I would see all my friends in New York and whatever. And those were, and weirdly, they remained my community. So I've had the same friends for a lot of my life. But then around, I don't know, maybe like 10 years ago, I did this fellowship, which was the first time in my adult life where I was able to sort of, it was 2 weeks over 2 years, so 4 weeks total, so 2 weeks a year, where you go and they basically lock you in a room with 20 other people and you read Plato and stuff like that. It was like going back to college, or it was like really fun. Okay, so I really enjoy. I love nerding out on that way. And that community of people, and this particular fellowship is at the Aspen Institute, and it's
Love
called the
Aspen Institute.
Henry Crown Fellowship. Yeah. So it's all people who are business people for the most part, but looking to take what they've gotten in life, or learned, and share it with other people and do some good, right? Like not just do stuff for themselves. And that group of people has been the most steadfast, supportive, unbelievable group of friends. I'm not like a big networking person. I probably should be, but I just like having real friends, and I'm not as good at small talking. Like I almost don't understand it. It makes me feel uncomfortable, if I'm really honest. So I just try and, make a lot of good friends
Yeah.
and spend time with those people. But yeah, to your question, in terms of starting a business and stuff, I mean, those people have made introductions for me, but more importantly, like really given me thoughtful, real feedback and advice, and
Mhm.
helped explain things to me that I couldn't ask other friends. So if I didn't have those particular friends, I think I couldn't have started either of the businesses that I've started. And so I try, when I'm introduced to people who I think I can be helpful to, just to share like something like raising money. Nobody really tells you how to raise money,
No.
and I worked for like 6 months with a venture fund to try and figure out this piece. So I kind of know it, but I still didn't know it nearly as well as I did after my friend who works in finance explained it to me, right? But there's something expected in the room that's unsaid. And it's a disqualifying moment for so many people with wonderful ideas.
Mhm.
So I think it's important to pay this stuff forward, and to take your most immediate community, but pay forward those lessons and that support to other people who aren't part of your immediate community. I mean, I started recently started using Clubhouse, which I think is this very interesting app, and but what I've seen is like how community oriented it is in a way that's quite different from other social platforms. And that's actually very appealing to me because I've had really substantive conversations. I don't have as much time as a lot of people spend
Right.
doing it, but it is interesting to see how grateful people are to just have someone say how things work, in a real way, as opposed to, even if you're in a classroom, most professors are not adjunct professors. They don't work.
Yeah.
So they're teaching you, when they're talking about the professional world, they're teaching you stuff that they don't necessarily know that well or would thrive
Hmm.
that well if they tried to participate themselves. So you really need to find people who do those jobs. Mentorship programs are really important. I think of it as like friendtorship because I'm always learning from the people that, like I'm sharing with too. But yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but
It does, and I mean, there's so many friends that I speak with that talk about not having access to the information. I've
hmm
recently started a group with several people of color and women, and we're just sharing information back and forth. And they're like, "How did you
yeah,
know that? How did you?" And it literally, we're all at the point of understanding there's just so much information that has been sealed and just kept for certain people, and that has
totally.
not been
So true.
available.
Yep, I think that's absolutely true. So what kind of platform do you use to do that? Like, is it a group? Is it a Facebook group? Is it an email group? What is it?
This is a
I'm curious.
FaceTime group, and
FaceTime.
literally
Oh, I
now
love it.
with
So it's like just very immediate.
yeah, and because now you can have much more people
hmm
on the FaceTime chat. Literally, someone has an idea, and we have a set time every week to get together and say, "Hey, here's some piece of information that might be helpful to you in your company," and so forth. And we just realized,
I
wait
love
a minute,
that.
there's so much information that we just don't know. And full disclosure, one of my good friends and mentors, he's a white male in the same industry that I'm in. He set me down because after last year, when all the companies wanted to, jump into diversity, equity, inclusion after George
hmm
Floyd's murder,
Yeah,
I realized I was being underpaid severely, and he set me down and shared all of his pricing matrix, with me.
it's very
And
important. That is actually, I'm so glad you brought that up because that is so important. I have to admit that, like, when I've left companies where I have totally spilled the beans because I think it's incredibly important for people to know, what other people are being paid. I mean, I have almost nothing positive to say about practicing law except for the fact that the one thing lawyers do is they publish everybody's salary. So there is no
mm,
question about what
right,
people are making, right? And I
yeah.
think but it is, I mean, that's one of many things that are not discussed. And there's that disparity with men and women, definitely. I mean, look, just just fundraising. If you look around at all the funds with all the money, yes, there are some unbelievably small percentage of funds that are focused on funding businesses of like BIPOC people or, women, but it's a small group. And when you walk into those rooms, it's generally either like, you know, older white men or young women who all have MBAs, and they're usually more in the assistant roles or like the junior roles. It's kind of embarrassing. And they're like, I always feel embarrassed by the whole situation, that it's not always like that. But how are you going to walk in then if you're a person who has like an incredible idea, you know how to do it, and what you need is capital. Because if you don't get that capital, you cannot leave your job. You cannot, so it's like, what the hell are you going to do if people do not share this information and insist that it changes? So I mean, I think about it all the time, and it's also the LPs, right? Like the people who invest in these funds. Who are they? What are they doing? Where's their accountability? You know what I mean? Like I feel like, I say that, and I've taken money from funds, but I don't know who all their LPs are. It's just a very shadowy kind of, and by the way, like I mean, some venture capitalists I know are amazing people. Like they're incredible, and I'm lucky to work with some. So I don't mean to say it's always like this, but I try to imagine the experience of someone who doesn't have a strong network and doesn't have access to the information that I've, rooted out over the years. And I mean, the cards are just like really stacked against you.
Yeah.
It's really tough. And it's such a shame because the world is missing out on great ideas, great businesses, great people because of it, you
And a
know,
big part of that is a lot of people are afraid to also ask for help. What do you say to people who are a little bit
afraid to
afraid
ask.
to, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I remember when I started working at Apple, I was very afraid to ask anybody for anything because it's not at all like its brand. It's the culture is pretty intense and not very friendly, and so I would go to the other side of campus and find people, and I kind of like strike up conversations and ask them questions because I had nothing to lose. Um, I think it's really there are a lot of organizations now that are trying to like mentor programs or whatever. When I was younger, I tried that. That didn't work for me. I found that the mentors that I was set up with seemed to be people who were more thinking about their careers and getting credit for stuff as opposed to really helping other people. But
yes,
then I lucked at, and you know what
I
the type of
do.
person
I
I
understand.
I call them show ponies, which isn't very nice, but I yeah, but it is true. I'm being a little bit catty, but yeah, I think it's interesting. I think anybody who's really running a business or who's in a business, if you ask them, I've had a lot of people approach me just on LinkedIn and ask me to have conversations. I've had people on Clubhouse do the same thing. I always make time. Like, unless I think they're trying to sell me something, but if it's like a person who's just genuine, I think you have to just be
I
brave. You have
agree.
nothing to lose. All you lose is the opportunity maybe to have found out something that you know what I mean, you wanted to know. And otherwise, it's a reflection on them if they don't respond to you. Now, some people will be so busy they may not see your email or whatever, but the squeaky wheel almost always does get the oil. And so, like, if you just persistently and politely continue to ask, you will get that time. I mean, who was like the master of that is he's no longer alive, but a man named Bill Campbell. He's very well known in the Valley, and everybody called him the coach because I think he started his career as a football coach at Columbia or something. But he ended up being like an investor advisor to like Sergey Brin and Larry Page and all these people. But he was equally supportive to people coming up. Like I met him because he was on the board of a company I was working at, and I just, I said, Bill, I'm working on this project. I'd really like to talk to you about it. He's like, okay, I'll give you 90 minutes. And he did, and he was sick, and it was towards the end of his life, but he kept his commitment. Like he always came through for people, and I was nobody, in his world, and he was kind and generous. Look for the kind and generous people. They're out there. They really do want to help.
Yeah, I believe that wholeheartedly. I tell people all the time, there are tons of people who want to help, and they just need to know that you actually need the help and support that's
If
there.
you don't ask, they don't know.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
try to think about some of the young women I know who are starting businesses, and every once in a while I shoot them a note just to kind of check in. to see how they're doing. But it's hard to remember to do that when you're busy on your own stuff. So yeah, I mean, you've said it. It's like you just have to ask. You just have to
Yeah.
force yourself to do that.
And speaking back or sort of circling back to this whole idea of just balance, and I don't know how you feel about that word. How does one strike a healthy something in their life where they are taking care of themselves, they're being ambitious and creative and nurturing all their passions and being able to be in, relationship with their family? How does that happen for you personally, or
I mean, during the pandemic, it's happened just by proximity.
of course?
But weirdly, I really do work more than I should. I should get better at working less.
Mhm.
Um, I think what I do to make sure I maintain balance is there are some things I do for myself, right? So like I meditate every night. I really, if I miss that somehow because I'm so tired, I just pass out or something. I really I miss it. And so that helps me. I try to be in nature a lot. I really love walking in the woods. I have, dogs that are always friendly and loving to me, whereas my teenage children sometimes are not. I have very good friends who, when I have free time and I'm not with my family, I'm talking to them or walking with them. It's those simple connections in life. Like I love cooking a good meal for friends.
Me
It
too.
just makes me so happy. It's so great to sit down and have this 3-hour meal, and it just fills you in so many ways. And so those are the things that really, and I exercise. So over COVID, I fell out of the habit of exercising because I used to like classes, but I've become the cliched Peloton rider, like
Ah,
I'm
yeah.
like I'm
Yeah.
like ridiculous. But there are bears where I live, so I don't really want to go like too far out into the woods. You know. So anyway, but so I do those little things, and that uh, it doesn't take a lot to make a real difference in how I feel. If I deny myself those things, I very quickly start to spin out and feel like I'm not sleeping as well, maybe a little bit anxious. I'm like, there's like a sense of sort of discomfort that I have if I don't do those things.
Yeah. Same for me, 100%. If I am not working out, if I'm not doing my meditations, I am off my game. And it is
Yeah.
so very well apparent. So, Christina, as we're about to wrap up this conversation, one thing that I'm really curious about just throughout our COVID experience and now maybe sort of coming out of COVID, what have you
Yeah.
learned most about yourself throughout the pandemic?
Oh, Clay, I've spent a lot of time with myself over this pandemic. But uh, gosh, it's such a hard question. I think what I've learned is that I I really am a resilient person, and that I really can, despite like there's a lot of difficult things that we didn't even get into happened over COVID, which they did for so many people, right? But that despite all of that, I am a person who gravitates towards joy, and that my spirit is always going to be headed in that direction no matter what. Like I'm always going to find my way there. I'm always looking to get up to the top of the cave, to the mouth of the cave, and and take as many people there with me as possible. And that is definitely became very clear to me how important that was to me because it was so tested, I think, over the last year.
Wow. I always get the podcast title from the guests and gravitating towards joy. That's a good one, Christina. That,
Oh,
that
well,
that's a
this
powerful one.
this has been so fun speaking with you. I hope we have a chance to meet in person at some point. You seem like a great guy.
Yeah, definitely. I think part two of a conversation I would love to have with you is on resiliency, because I think, again, is one of those misconstrued words, and people sort of have a basic definition, but it's a much more robust understanding. I would love to hear more about
Yeah.
what happened to you and your family during the pandemic. But, Christina, where can people learn more about you and be able to connect to all your great products at Mab and Stoke?
Well, anybody who wants to connect with me directly, you can just DM me on Instagram. So I'm Mab Maker on Instagram.
I love that.
And if you want to check out Mab and Stoke, it's just mabandstoke.com. So MABANDSTOKE.com. And we've got a lot of cool stuff coming out this fall. So, check back. But I appreciate anybody listening. I hope, there was stuff in there that was helpful or interesting to you.
Absolutely. So listen, folks, I'll have all of Christina's information at the base of this podcast. Again, Christina, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. Again, you can learn more about me by visiting clayswilliams.com. And I'm on all of your favorite social media by the handle of @PlanA with Clay. That's @PlanA with Clay. Remember, folks, Clay is with a K. Thanks for listening. I look forward to seeing you in our very next episode of Plan A Conversations. Peace.